One of the books I read for these book talks is called The Duping of the American Voters, and it's pretty much about voters and presidential advertising and how they affect how we vote and how we think about our candidates. And it's an interesting book because it's very relevant to right now as of Trump winning and the advertising that is used nowadays. And this book talks about it all the way back to when it was first started, like false advertising with Eisenhower and stuff. And I just thought it was really relevant to Trump because Trump is very well known for lying in his advertising and also just fabricating a lot of things in his advertising and campaigning to get people to vote for him or like him. And I don't know, it was recommended by my dad, and he got it from his school library since they were clearing out, and they just didn't really want the book anymore. And according to my research and my father, the book actually isn't even in print anymore. So um, even though it's not in print, I think it should be because it's very relevant, and also it's eye opening. It makes you think about how you're such a small part of such a just a big system in the advertising that happens in our campaigns now. And I found it very interesting because it gives you chapters with like specific campaigns, and like it goes all the way from Eisenhower to like um, Kennedy and just all kinds of stuff, and how they're manipulated by a big government and money and stuff like that, just all to get into a position of power, such as the presidency, the Senate, Congress, anything of presidential power. And one of the chapters I thought was most interesting was chapter 2, which is called "The First Misleading Presidential Campaign Commercial." And I don't know, I found it very interesting. Here, I'll read you this small part. Tom Dewey did not buy the idea of lowering himself to the commercial environment of a toothpaste ad. That was simply too inelegant for an idea for a man who envisioned himself an important place in American history. Certainly a man of Dewey's prominence did not be commercialized to beat the hick Truman. Rosser Reeves would not have to wait another 4 years to become the godfather of the first political commercial for a presidential campaign. So it's interesting because then it goes on to say how he did this commercial for this toothpaste, and it ended up costing him the presidential election, Eisenhower, by around 14,000 votes. That's it. And it was mainly centered around the Midwest since that's where the commercial took place. So I found it really interesting while I was reading this that like nowadays people are concerned about like, all the loud music and all the very dark like pictures and stuff that make you want to envision that a candidate's bad or whatever. But right here within like the first advertising, it was actually because of a toothpaste commercial that made this guy lose. So I don't know. I find it interesting how we've progressed as a nation and how we campaign for our positions of power in our government. I found it very interesting how it starts with that. Um, I would recommend this to any reader that likes anything political or honestly just wants to know more about our government and more of the inside stuff and what we don't know as much as other things like campaigning and the money. Because in here it also talks about one another part that I found very interesting was Jimmy Carter. It talked about how at first he was not known at all just because he didn't have money. So it's interesting to think that our political system is run by money. Like Jimmy Carter, who became one of our presidents, at first he wasn't able to do so because he just didn't have money. Nobody recognized him and nobody owed him anything. Therefore, he was not on the big stage in the American people's thoughts and vision. It's also very cool with all the pictures it gives you. It gives you some examples and stuff like that. See, like it gives you random things of people on the street. See, look, people on the street and their opinions towards the government. And this is this is black and white. So it's interesting to look at this and see the opinions and thoughts of others of America compared to today. So I give this book maybe a 7 out of 10. It's very interesting, a little boring in some parts, but I'd recommend it to any political reader or anybody that wants to learn more about voting and to keep updated for their future voting and how it affects the campaigns and our presidential candidates.